Great to be back on stage and not being sung at. I'm appreciating the modest silence on stage for a change. So we're going to be talking all about measurement in this panel. Obviously, a very important area regardless of what's going on in the industry, but facing a lot of change as we move away from IDs and cookie deprecation continues. But before we start the chat, if you'd just like to go through and introduce yourself, starting with you, Niall.
Yeah, I'm Niall Moody. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for a company called Nano Interactive, and we're an identity-free targeting platform.
Afternoon, guys. My name is Nick Reed. I'm Managing Director of Verify across EMEA, DV's media quality measurement company.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Collins. I'm Group Performance Director at Omnicom Media Group.
And hi, I'm Brandon Keenan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Ziglu, soon to be another company. And I just realized I need to work on my profile pic. So if anyone does profile pics.
You and me both.
It's idiosyncratic, Brandon.
What's that?
It's idiosyncratic, it stands out. Yeah, it's great. But we'll get into the discussion. So as mentioned, there's a lot of change facing, the measurement space and attribution in the wake of cookie deprecation. So how has measurement and attribution evolved, and how is it continuing to evolve as we continue to move into a privacy-first, consumer-centric age of marketing? Niall, I'll start with you on that one.
It's hugely changing, and we've heard lots of people talking about it today. I think if you look at that, if we all drink the Kool-Aid and we look at that kind of one-to-one marketing and at scale, and that data-driven attribution model that we perhaps all kind of thought was that idealistic kind of world we were going to have we just don't have that anymore. We're kind of impacted on all the reasons that you spoke about there, consumer behavior on top of that, browser design and things like that. So the idea of us being able to track people and individuals all the way through to path of conversion is definitely not the realism that we're dealing with now. But I think with that change and with that challenge, I think, I'm a positive guy. I think there's a lot of opportunity that can come out of that. And I think, certainly from my experiences and our experiences at Nano, we're seeing that there's a genuine, not just the kind of buzzword sense of it, there's a genuine sense of kind of collaboration. And I think Rachel at HP sort of spoke about earlier on, it's the idea of bringing different people together around a table, different vendors, different partners, to try and solve for problems that perhaps weren't there before and will only further be exacerbated if Google sort of change their stance on cookies. So I think it's the brands at the moment that are starting that kind of test and learn that will do well in the future. I think they're able to kind of calibrate what works for them now and what links with their kind of business outcomes.
Nick, what do you think? What kinds of evolutions have you seen sort of in measurement?
Well, I think the theme of today is that things don't work as they are, need to be changed. So they need to be fixing consistently. The attribution piece, what we've already discussed, needs to kind of evolve. But measurement and media quality is not new, right? We've had an entire industry built off that, not just from a digital perspective, but from a TV perspective. I think how that measurement is evolving is really from a baseline of media quality. And when we think about media quality, viewability used to be used as a proxy, for example. I don't think that's sufficient anymore. So when we think about media quality as a business, is that ad viewable by a human being, so fraud-free? Is it viewable? Is it brand safe, brand suitable? And is it the right geolocation? That for us is an authentic ad. And that really where measurement starts. And then how we start to think about performance is really built upon that base layer of basic measurement. And I think kind of technology has enabled us to do that. But again, it's not a new concept, but it really is something that brands, I think, are thinking much, much more, not just from a base layer of media quality, but actually over the last 2 years, they've become a lot more socially aware because everything that's been going on. We heard in the last panel around not just the importance of media quality, but kind of sustainability, suitability. All those elements are really feeding into measurement, and all those elements become much more prominent when we think about how we reach consumers, because the consumers expect us to be thinking about that now.
Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that point about doing what's right by the consumer is obviously front of mind as we do move towards this privacy-first world, and it's probably something that we should have been doing a long time ago, but it's only regulatory and technological changes that have now forced us into doing that. And so it's solutions that are aggregated non-user level data or consented user level data. And unfortunately, it's not just one or the other. As Niall said, it's about bringing multiple stakeholders into this conversation because there is no one-size-fits-all solution. I think that now more than ever, it's going to be important for brands to firstly have multiple strings to their bow, and secondly, to be taking those other considerations in mind. So putting privacy at the center of what they're doing, but also thinking more responsibly about the way they're running their marketing and the way they are measuring, because we may have got used to, over the last few years, this kind of all-you-can-eat buffet of data, but if you picture it as one of those sort of dodgy global buffets for a fiver, was that ever good for us? Was that ever the right thing? What we're doing now, actually, or what we should be doing, is thinking more about the quality of the data that we're getting and less about the quantity of it.
Brandon, what do you think on this?
So it's really interesting. So I've spent the last 20 years, working on attribution, and from starting out kind of early stage network and trying to solve attribution and game theory attribution and trying to figure this all out. And then someone finally decided to give me the keys to the marketing budget and became a marketer and jumped to the other side of the table. And it's been really interesting because I still continue that quest to solve attribution, and I'm slowly giving it up. So and I guess I'm not really giving it up totally. I mean, measurement is still hugely important. Success metrics are still hugely important. You have to know, it's very custom to a particular business. So understanding what type of data points you're looking for that show trends to growth, or understanding baselines of where your business is at on the things that you're measuring to, and then seeing what moves those baselines. And then if it moves the baseline, just do more of it. And if it doesn't, do less. So but we still look at modeling, and I think attribution will still be key in looking at from a digital perspective. I think attribution is less important for brands like with a really strong brand presence, because there's so much out there and their baseline is so different, and consumers interact with them differently. I think for startups and companies that are kind of doing a little bit more digital stuff, attribution will still be important. But I think you said it earlier, experimentation is going to be key, and really testing and learning, and stop really relying on data points and just say the data will lead our strategy. The data will tell us what's happening, but the experiments will lead our strategy, and we'll find more customers this way. And you just have to really find a good balance. So for us, we've got 4 different ways to measure now, but I think that's another question coming up. So I'll stop.
We will come to that. But before then, Nick, you brought up, viewability as a kind of proxy. Thinking about viewability and other sort of maybe legacy targeting, measurement metrics and click-through rates and things, do you think that we'll see the kind of reliance on those wane as we move towards kind of this cookieless future, or do you think that there's still a place for them?
You kind of just touched upon it then when you mentioned measurement, then targeting, because that measurement's feeding into targeting, especially as we think about discussions earlier. So I think we're in a place now because we spent years building technology where we chase people around the internet, and we kind of overexpose the consumer rather than delivered them a personalized experience that they cared about. Hence why we have ad blocking, and hence why we're in a situation with GDPR in essence. So, we need to think about kind of not just how we measure, but how we engage with that consumer. And based upon that, we need to think about how far we then target that consumer. So it's already been discussed already today, the importance of contextual, not just in terms of understanding the relevancy or the suitability or the safety of where an ad's been delivered, but actually, how do I then use that context and content to re-engage that consumer in a privacy-friendly manner? And then if that's also the case, then, okay, what does success look like? Viewability isn't a measurement for success, nor is it a proxy, as I said earlier. It's just an element of kind of, okay, how am I investing my money in terms of my media? But then kind of, what does success look like? How do we start to engage with consumers at the top of the funnel? How do we start to attribute success if it's not through last click attribution? Is it something through attention? So there's different elements that we're being forced, and perhaps rightly so, to recalibrate and think about how we again engage that consumer, because whilst we think we've been probably doing a good job for the last few years, we clearly haven't. So that resetting it means it's an exciting time. All the challenges we've heard today are kind of exciting ones that we all have a role, hopefully, to play in.
And Laura, what do you think about kind of what the future looks like for maybe traditional metrics? Do you think that we will reach a point where things like click-through rate will be obsolete, or is that maybe a bit of an overstatement?
I think that viewability is an interesting one because people have had issues with viewability for years. That's not a conversation that's just sprung up because of this new privacy-first world that we're all hurtling towards. And I think that if alternatives become available in the market that are accurate and scalable and consistent, then yes, it could very likely become obsolete. I think with click-through rate, possibly that's less likely to sort of slide into obscurity because it depends what your objective is with whatever tactic you're using. I know people would refer often to click-through rate as a proxy metric, but if you're running, you know, a campaign and your intention with it is that people click on the ads and end up on your site, then actually click-through rate is quite a valid option for you to use. So I think that we will see the selection of metrics that we choose to use evolve and change, but I would put the list of the ones that are going to become completely obsolete as fairly small, but viewability would probably be top of that list.
I think also, I don't think they could be seen independent of each other. So, for example, viewability in Europe, we've seen over the last, I think we've done the 5th year of our insight, we've seen the last 5 years increase. I think it's 70% across Europe now. So viewability's reached a stable layer, but you then have to combine that with media quality based around brand suitability, brand safety, brand equity. All these things become increasingly important, not just in terms of where the ad's seen, but actually the environment it's seen in and by the people it's seen in. So to look at things independent of each other, or metrics independent of each other, doesn't really make any sense, how they all work together. So you are driving quality and the best business outcomes.
And Niall, what do you think about what the near future looks like for traditional metrics that are already, you know, more prevalently in use?
I think near future is one thing, and where we go in the direction of travel is a different one. I think in near future, some of the challenges that we've heard from some of the earlier panels are that there are stakeholders in the business that have got weaned on, need to get weaned off some of these metrics that actually, in QBRs, they're the things that they go straight for. I think there's an opportunity now. I think you can, to maybe touch on Brandon's point, I think you can see where actually a focus on outcome, a focus on actually looking at what is the thing that's driving my bottom line or driving my business growth. Touched upon by, I think, Susanna, and sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but a focus on outcomes. What are the repeatable kind of events or those proxies, I guess, that correlate with my business outcomes? What are the things that I can do over time by analyzing data, interrogating the kind of performance that I have to date, and then repeat those over time? So I think it will take a lot for a whole industry to wean itself off CTR straight away. I think Laura's exactly right. I think it's horses for courses. There'll be bits where it will be appropriate, but I do see that and probably attention to the and I'm sure we'll go on to this, but it's the burgeoning example of that, whereby that if you can analyze data, you can really understand what the brand's trying to achieve in the outset. You can optimize to new things. Because you can prove a correlation with a long-term business metric.
I mean, yeah, speaking more about data and I guess data consolidation, how will this be affected going forward as we introduce these new metrics? And do you think that this idea of a single source of truth will be more achievable? I'll come to you on this, Brandon, because I think you have strong feelings about this.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, single source of truth is impossible. You'll never have it. I think a little bit on those last questions too. I've been optimizing now to click-through rate and last click. Go click-through rate. I've been in client meetings going, you're looking at the wrong metrics, right? But it's data that leads to certain things. And it depends on the brand and what their goals are. We in this particular case, we're trying to get new customers. And we look at how many customers, we look at it almost down to the minute of how many customers come in at a minute. So we know very acutely what's running and where those customers are coming from, but we can't connect the media to the actual customer because of the privacy law. So customer comes in through whatever ad, lands into an Apple store, everything just gets erased, and then it shows up as a customer, and then I can't match it back, and then we try. And then, and so I can't look at my customer and say, well, they all came from this place, and they came from this place, and they came from this ad, and they came from this ad. So I'm looking at click-through rates to think about how those things all worked. So I have to, and then I have to optimize to install, but that's not, I don't care about install. It's the wrong metric. It's the only thing I can measure to. And then all I really care about is customer. So I get customer. And I can't get customer through one source of truth because I've got a CRM in the back end that's telling me about my customers and what they do. I've got an attribution piece in the front. I've got brands. I look at share of search. I look at share of voice. I look at our model. I look at our experiments. I test and learn. And then we go, well, that seemed to have worked. And I know that sounds really stupid. Believe me, I've been on all sides of this table, and it's like you've come back. And I've fought for getting rid of last click attribution because I think it's the dumbest thing known to man, But it's like, that's all you can measure to. So game theory, how many people are on the pitch at the same time, and thinking about, oh, well, if they're there, we score more goals, and if they're there, we score less. And, you think about that, and, at this point, I'm just hiring Ronaldo, and if he comes on, scores a goal, I'm going to do more of that. And, of course, I got to experiment with a few other players. But I just think that I've spent so much time. I've worked with Coachava, I've worked with AppsFlyer, I've worked with all these attribution pieces, and we've really built out our own ways to fingerprint customers and try to match them through before the App Store, and then it gets just Breaking Bad wiped, just cleaned, where you're like, okay. So I really think for a brand, you have to come up with your own way of measuring that is unique to you, right? And I think for advice from agencies and all that, it's like, stop telling brands well, you should be doing this and you should be doing that, because believe me, we know. Maybe we're unique. We know exactly what we're doing and exactly how it's working. And it may be completely wrong to what you think we should be measuring to. So to me, click-through rate, cost per install is really important. Viewability to me, again, no offense. Viewability is now I think sort of an assumption that things should be viewable. Maybe that's totally naive, right? Because but I don't know about, oh God, sometimes I regret what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say. Display, programmatic. So are we going to throw anything? No? Okay. Maybe a couple years ago at that conference, we were throwing stuff. It's all about connecting with brands with incredible creative and doing incredible things and doing stuff that's for your brand. Now, is TikTok a safe place? Could you say, well, that's a safe place? Probably you can't say that's a safe environment. Can you say viewability? What are they measuring? A 3-second view. But I can run a TikTok campaign. I can see my likes and my engagement, my metrics, and I go, oh. And then I can look, and then I'll take that and go, did I see an uplift in our customer baseline? Okay, do more of that. So the things that are more important to me are brand strength, share of search, how many people are looking for us, discoverability, how many people are installing, and then how many of those installs turn into customers, and then how many of those customers can I turn into advocates, and then thinking about that whole. Remember the old funnel? We've had conferences where we said the funnel is dead. Funnel's back, and it's even more fragmented. Sorry.
I mean, that was a lot to take in.
I know. I'm looking at Kieran because he knows. Google, man, Google. Although Google's our worst performer, most expensive. Facebook's our best performer.
But do you think we're trying to oversimplify things?
Sorry. I'm totally. Am I trying to oversimplify things?
I think we are as an industry, because you go back to your point, each brand's different. It is fragmented, the way in which the expectations are. Are we trying to oversimplify things? We need to go back to the basics and actually say, well, what do I want to achieve as a specific brand? What are the business outcomes that may be very different to other brands? Okay, that's what I should orientate around. By the sounds of things.
I think, look, I've worked with agencies. We had a couple of really great agencies we work with, and it's really a bespoke model of measurement. It's really sitting down at the table and being, what is important to your business and how are we going to achieve that? Instead of saying, stop looking at that click-through rate or stop looking at that, it's like, no, let's just figure out what our model is. And I think every single model should be totally bespoke to that particular brand and their goals and their metrics. Because the thing I've learned the hard way is every exec at every business, not just your CMOs, are interested in marketing. They all sit around, we have more exec meetings, and just every exec wants to know what's going on, what's happened, where's the customers, where's this, where's that, So it's really important to have metrics that are clear and relatable that work within the business, that you can go back to the senior level execs and say, this is what we've done, this is why it worked, this is why it didn't work, and this is what we're going to do next. So I really think from an agency perspective, the guys we've been working with have been great because they kind of just work with us, and we know we're not solving it accurately. But I really think it's what's important, find a solution, and then once you believe it, whether half of it's made up, just believe in it and commit to it, and then adjust it as you go. But it might not be perfect, but it's a model, because this perfection that we've been trying to achieve is impossible.
Those business outcomes rather than media outcomes, aren't they? They're driving your specific business outcomes, and to an extent you say, I don't care how I get there as long as I get there.
Well, the business outcome is, you're looking at brand growth, brand strength, and you're looking at customers, right? And then if you have all that, I think, so looking at the business outcomes, and then how do you work your way back into that? And then we say, well, install's the wrong way to look at it, because install means nothing, because you want to look at how many people turned into customers, and then where did those customers come from, and which ones are your better customers, and which ones, and you can't do that. So it's just gone, it just turns into this black hole. There's a dividing line between Apple Store and now Google Store, and then there's a dividing line between customer and install, and then there's a dividing line between customer and advocacy, and all these. There's just too many walls that you're like, okay, well, fuck it, we have no idea what we're doing.
I'm just going to jump in here just because I'm conscious of that.
He asked the question.
Very, very interesting, but I am, it's Nick's fault. I'm just conscious of time. And
sorry, can I rephrase? I don't want to say Facebook was our best performer if someone booed me. Yes, sorry. You're right. No, Facebook, that's a different story. Yeah. We can talk after. I don't have good feelings.
Please save booing till the end of the panel. Thank you.
You can boo. I'll boo with you.
We'll move tact and focus a bit more on attention. And its place within measurement. So, to what extent do you think that the future of measurement is attention-based metrics, or do you think perhaps there's maybe an overemphasis on attention? I'll start with you, Laura, for that one.
I think there's a little bit too much of a tendency to just grab for the newest, shiniest thing, and perhaps people are viewing attention as the solution to all of our problems, when it is a solution, but it's still so nascent, that those things that I listed earlier, accurate, consistent, scalable. At the moment, it's really none of those. And yes, it may get there eventually, but even when it does, it's not going to be the answer to every single measurement problem that brands have. It's a way of being able to determine whether someone has actually seen and paid attention to your ad. Great, possibly better than the viewability metrics that we've relied on historically. But, looking at the technologies that exist within that space, some very expensive to run, so possibly will be quite inaccessible to a lot of brands that are out there. And also, even looking at the kind of tag-based tracking that exists, for me, there's a big question mark over how much more accurate that's going to be than the current viewability metrics that we have already, because it is, if you read the literature and you look at some of the methodology behind it, it's still, in essence, taking an educated guess as to how likely your ad is to get someone's attention when it's in a certain place on a certain page online. And so is it worth us all moving wholesale from one devil that we know to another? Possibly not. But I think, to go back to a point that was made earlier, we also need to remember that each brand needs to go on a different journey within that space. Yes, early tests have indicated that attention-based metrics do translate to business results, but that's not going to be true for everyone. And so a brand on an individual basis needs to test whether that is the case for them, because the testing that's been done so far is it's panel-based, it's very limited. Brands that rely on appearing in quite niche spaces online might actually find that those results don't apply to them at all. And so attention is definitely not the right solution for them. It's another one on the menu, but it's not the answer to all of our problems.
Do you agree, Niall? What do you think about attention?
Yeah, I really agree with that. It is just another tactic. And to try and summarise, I think, Brendan, what you were talking about, you're looking for the things that you can repeat, and what are the things that work for you, those metrics that work for you and help you hit your goals and help you drive your metrics. I think attention is probably the first kind of example of us looking at what could be next and what could fill that hole that was maybe filled with that kind of deluge of data that we spoke about earlier on. I do think, similarly, we've seen from our experiences Nano, when you get the targeting right and you optimize to a definition of attention, you can see that you can drive those brand metrics, those uplift metrics there, that those brands themselves will know will have an impact on their brand's performance over time. So there's a place for it. As an industry, we have to talk about things, and this is one of the things that we talk about. There probably is an overemphasis on it. I think we just need to understand that it's a tactic within an industry.
Yeah. Do you agree, Nick? Do you think it's more just a tactic, or do you think it's the next?
I agree that there's loads of talk of it. There's a shortage of it, and that's half the problem, because we're not driving attention to the consumer. The challenge with attention is it's not finite. So therefore it becomes different horses for different courses when it comes to different types of advertisers or categories of advertisers. And to an extent, until it's finite, it becomes hard to optimize towards and therefore utilize as a strategy or targeting strategy anyway. I do completely think it has a role, given kind of we go back to, given that the top of the funnel is no longer dead and it's back. So it absolutely has a role, but like all these things, alongside everything else as well. Because depending on your brand, depending on the life stage of that consumer, where they're on that journey, we're going to lose different metrics. But I think fundamentally, given the situation with what's going on with the deprecation of third-party cookies, it will absolutely play a role. We just need to kind of define or refine what that role is. And that, again, goes back to kind of testing and learning and listening and partnering.
And I guess just to kind of, because we're running a little bit tight for time, just to kind of finish off the discussion on outcomes-based marketing. Do you think that the ID deprecation crisis or the mobile crisis brought upon by cookie deprecation, do you think that will give outcomes-based marketing a bit more of a time to shine, and will omni-channel become more prominent, do you think, as we move into this new era? Brandon, I'll start with you.
So I think, omnichannel is going to be important. I think in a weird way we all sort of agree, but I think the one thing is like take a step back at the beginning. I'm not speaking on behalf of all brands by any stretch. I'm speaking on behalf of my own personal experience, and I think it's really deeply understanding how you work, and then the what channels will work, and then I think there was a stage in digital where we said digital's the future, TV's dead, radio's over. Measure everything, you'll be a great success. And now we're going, whoa, hang on a minute. Maybe that doesn't work. So, radio, when I was at CNN, we lost a lot of pitches to radio. And we're like, that's not even like, it wasn't a competitor. It's just like you just lose to different things. So I do think like radio and TV and, even straight TVC or connected TV and all those things will be really important. But it's a matter of finding very specific ways to measure. Like I said, we look at brands, we look at digital attribution will be a part of it. Modeling, and then I think we've all said it a lot, just test, learn, do more of that. So I think if you're working with brands, find them that have this kind of baseline measure where they understand it, and then do all these things. So I'm not totally sure I answered your question, but that's like I'm like a politician, I just keep talking the same tagline.
It's all great insight, so it's all appreciated. Laura, what do you think on this?
Well, I think that brands should have been thinking about an omni-channel approach to their marketing and their measurement for years to come. So if that's the one silver lining of this crisis, is that forces more brands and agencies to be thinking that way, then that is some solace that we can take. But sometimes it's a crisis that forces us to break bad habits, and otherwise we wouldn't have broken them at all. But thinking about outcomes versus attention or viewability, it's really not a one or the other. No brand should be saying, right, we're only ever going to measure this one metric now, and that's how we'll judge the success of everything that we're doing. Yes, obviously you're going to have an overarching business objective, which is likely sales or new customers or whatever it may be, but that should inform an omni-channel, multi-layered measurement framework where you are choosing the most appropriate metric by which to measure the success of all of the different tactics you're using within the limitations of what you're able to measure. Of course, there are some instances where the media cannot connect to that final consumer, but that should mean, in every case, plenty of different metrics. And then you use that to judge the success of each tactic in its own right, but then also, in addition to that, bearing in mind that overarching business objective, you need to layer over that a more of a zoomed out view. So whether that's using media mix modeling, whether that's using econometrics, that's how you judge the effectiveness of your full media mix in driving that end goal. So I think it's that combination of both, kind of the macro and the micro, that's going to provide the solution, which is made up of lots of mini solutions that we're going to need moving into the future.
That's what I meant to say. That was really good. That's exactly right.
Thanks, glad to help.
No, that was good. And it is about, we should have enough data to make that informs decisions, right? It's never going to inform the perfect decision, but you should get enough data. And then you have to have, you have to have really smart people behind this. It's not all going to be automated. So you have to have people who can look at it, analyze it, understand it, go, that's what's happening, this is what we should do. And you also can't hold them if it's wrong, be mad, just be like, okay, you encourage being wrong. But you have to have people in the background doing spreadsheets and stuff, or Anyway, sorry, you didn't ask me.
At all. I think that takes us to time, so we'll leave it there. But thank you guys so much for the excellent insights and great conversation.
Thank
you.
It's great having you.